Earlier this week, our political analyst Blois Olson and I spoke about the contentious situation right now amongst Minnesota lawmakers who are currently in session at the state capitol. Well, one of the thorns in the side of Republicans has been, over the months, the governor's use of executive authority under this peacetime emergency. When I spoke with Governor Walz while he visited a Civil War memorial in Waseoja a week ago, I asked him about his letter that he recently gave to legislative leaders about giving up his executive authority as long as he could make some of his orders law.
You gave a letter to lawmakers. You would end your executive authority, but you want certain parts of what have been implemented under that authority enacted possibly into law.
Why would there be a problem of protecting our veterans and our veterans' homes by codifying some of the changes we've made to make it easier for us to get materials in there? Why would it not set well with them that they would enact a moratorium on evictions for people who are following these orders? Why would it not set well with on them that they have to move procurement in a quicker manner? And if the response to that is, I get it. One of the reasons that they don't want to do a lot of these things is they don't believe the pandemic is real. They don't believe that mask wearing makes a difference, and they don't want to have it in place. Months and months ago, I said, if you simply enacted a mask mandate and we got Minnesotans to do it at 90%, we wouldn't need to do the rest of this. And so they have the opportunity to do all of these things. They can get together and do them, but they're choosing not to.
Jake Duesenberg is the president of the group called Action for Liberty. They have been around for about 7 or 8 years. And notably, my conversation with the governor last week, Jake, talking about his executive authority and the fact that a letter was sent to lawmakers saying that he would do away with his executive authority under COVID and this peacetime emergency. And that piece of the conversation we played right before this interview now, I kind of wanted to get your response to that because you've taken kind of an issue with Attorney General Keith Ellison, who was before the State Government Finance Committee this week.
That's right. Yeah, he argued that what the governor is doing right now is law, which is just a complete abomination. That's not what our Constitution says. Our Constitution has separated powers. Only the legislature can create laws. Article 5, which is what the executive branch has in the Constitution, does not allow the governor to unilaterally create laws. And that's a very important thing when these Democrats talk about our democracy. We got to protect our democracy. There's nothing more anti-democracy than one guy calling all the shots. And that's what's happening here. And so when I was watching the interview you did with him, I was just astounded by the fact that this guy believes he can continue on calling all the shots. And by the way, if the legislature follows what he says, then they can have their power back. That's not our system of government. We didn't have a pandemic that said, hey, let's just trade in all of our liberties. Let's just trade in our system of government. That's not an agreement we ever had with Governor Walz. And so what I think he's doing is illegal and it's unconstitutional.
But Jake, here's the deal. A lot of the protections because of COVID, because of the peacetime emergency, have been to make sure that people are able to stay in their homes. They can't be evicted. And there's other executive orders that he's put out to protect Minnesotans against some of the things that could happen to them. And so that's the argument on the other side. And when I was interviewing him, I heard that and I thought, that makes sense.
Yeah, the key word is could, right? Here's what we know. His lockdown orders, his shutdown orders have actually caused damage, things that we can prove in a court of law. We know that businesses have gone out of business because of his shutdown. We know that we could prove that bars and restaurants and gyms have lost a lot of their income because of his executive orders, his unilateral executive orders. So that is something we know, that the damage has been caused due to what he's done. He cannot prove that all of his measures have worked. I think a lot of people now realize lockdowns don't work at all. It actually leads to skyrocketing depression, even suicide rates. We need better mental health, and his lockdowns are hurting people. So it's interesting that you say the word could, because that's really all he can say is these could help our people. But the reality is we know what he is doing is actually hurting businesses and it's hurting people in Minnesota.
I didn't hear Attorney General Keith Ellison speaking before the Finance Committee this week, and you did. Tell me what specifically you took issue with what he specifically had to say.
Well, he's the top legal officer in Minnesota, right? Mm-hmm. So he's supposed to interpret the supreme law of the land, which is the Minnesota Constitution. And we have separated powers in our Constitution, just like the U.S. Constitution. Article 5 is the part that gives the executive branch, the governor, his powers. Nowhere in those powers does it say he can create laws, but the Attorney General says he can. Because he decrees it? That's just insane. So they're just making up rules as they go along. And that's illegal and that's unconstitutional. And that's got to stop because we're not ready to trade in this democratic form of government we have just because there's a pandemic.
And there have been many attempts to take this to court. Some actions are still in litigation or being looked at. Others have been thrown out in favor of the governor. And so then the argument there would be there hasn't been a basis for the argument that you have.
Yeah, I love that. I love how people always say, oh, the courts have decided this way. Well, the courts also upheld slavery at one time. The courts have upheld segregation. Courts aren't the final arbiters of what's constitutional or what is right or moral, right? That's why our organization, people can go to actionforliberty.com. They can learn more about what we're doing, but we're focused on the legislature because really what's at stake here is our republic, our Republican form of government where a legislature creates the laws. They have power, right? And they need to get that power back. And there's an ability to pass a resolution in both the House and Senate to do this very exact thing. And Governor Walz would lose his power. And that's where this needs to be resolved, not in the court system. I would love to say that some judge is going to interpret the Constitution the right way, but that often doesn't happen. And they generally are agents for big government. And that's hurting us. It's hurting Minnesotans. And I think that's wrong. So I think people need to focus where the real power lies, and that's within the people's representation, the state house and the Senate.
Well, we are keeping an eye on the resolution that is currently being debated by House and Senate members, and we'll see if anything comes of it, because I do know that an extension of this peacetime emergency is coming up yet again this month. With that said, Jake, I appreciate your time. Thank you. I did that interview yesterday. I did take time to reach out to DFL leaders to get reaction on this issue today. Speaker of the Minnesota House, Melissa Hortman, was not available. Neither was Majority House Leader Ryan Winkler. Our own state representative from southeastern Minnesota, DFLer Tina Liebling, was also not able to do an interview today. We will keep trying.